Okay, so without any further ado, let me hand this over to Jim Lohmann, our special guest. Jim?
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I've been a decorative wood carver for about 45 years. Most of my work has been done by hand. I still do handwork. I used pantograph type carving machines for many years, but as the technology evolved and became more affordable for small shops, I wanted to get involved with digital carving. And so I needed to get a machine and find out how to do this. I don't have a technical background. Everything that I've done is all pretty much traditional woodworking by hand. So this was a really new world for me to step into. But I decided to go in the direction of Rhino and RhinoCAM. I liked that the two companies partnered and that it was both features were in the one program, and that's been great for me. With 3D work that I do, everything is kind of mesh based, and the difficulty that I've come up against is creating models. We've been kind of limited until really recently in how to do that. They can be scanned, digitally scanned. They can be surface modeled, which I did quite a bit of in Rhino, but it was still kind of clumsy and kind of limiting. There weren't a lot of good ways to get real free-form types of curves and in the models that I wanted to make. So I moved into a program called ZBrush when that came around, and that's been really great. It's not an easy program to use, but it's just like modeling a piece of clay on the screen. But what you end up with is a mesh with all of these different approaches, and the problem that I've had is that some of these meshes are so huge that they become really cumbersome to work with, and the tools haven't been there to really get them prepared and into place to be able to work with with the toolpathing software. And so this new mesh module, or this new mesh feature that MecSoft has just developed, has been really surprisingly good. I haven't had much of an opportunity to work with it yet, but the little bit that I've done with it now, I've been really surprised at how well it will reduce without compromising the detail. Sometimes customers will provide me with a mesh and it can have 6 or 8 million triangles in it, which is huge. And when you're CNC machining, that kind of detail just isn't necessary. It's not called for, and so we need to be able to get rid of all of that extra noise in there and get down to a manageable size. And so that's been a great thing. And the features of being able to split meshes and pull curves off of the meshes are just really great tools, and they're going to certainly speed up my process. So the work that's on my website is mostly work that I've done by hand. There is some digital work. The column capitals and things like that, moldings and stuff, have all been done digitally, and I've had very good success and a good result with that. So if you want to move on.
So Jim, Jim, can you talk a little bit about your setup, your workshop setup? What kind of machines you use, and what are the
well, I basically just have a traditional woodworking shop, and then I have a CNC machine. I'm using a two-head machine that also has a rotary device on it, 2 rotary devices, so I can cut 2 parts at one time. And I routinely use the toolpathing software for 2D, 3D, or two axis, 3-axis, and 4-axis machining. And
okay, great.
So yeah, so it's it's my go-to tool. I use Rhino and RhinoCAM every day in my process, and I've never felt the need to look anyplace else for software. Yeah. And
okay, with any one of us, go to the next slide.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and then we can. So this is a mantelpiece. This is kind of a sample of a type of thing that I do. This was kind of an involved part. And there's always a trade-off, you know, when I'm doing work like this, is how much modeling do I want to do? How much is going to be hand carved? How much machining should I do? In this particular case, everything needed to be finished by hand, so I didn't work too hard with getting my models perfect. So I modeled what I needed to in ZBrush, which is the detail, that red detail in the upper right-hand corner. And then I was able to bring that into Rhino and mirror it as I did with the other parts in this model to build up the frieze for that mantelpiece, and then write a tool path to it and cut out my parts, and it was very, very efficient and very effective. I didn't spend a lot of time modeling. I didn't spend a lot of time tool pathing because I knew I was going to be going through and completely hand carving the surface anyway. But even still, I got a really clean. You can see in that middle picture on the right, you can see that the result of this is just the first roughing tool path for the machining, but you can see that it produced, even at that, a very clean result. I refined it one more tool path and then cleaned up the background, and it didn't leave a whole lot of hand carving left to do.
And the whole model was 8 million triangles.
And the whole model was, yeah, 8 million triangles. Now, wow. It would have been great. I mean, I did not have the new mesh tools to work with, but I could have easily probably cut that down to 500,000 triangles and not had any loss of detail. And it would have made my meshes much easier to work with.
Yeah.
And also I would have been able to pull the geometry I needed directly from the meshes to use as my tool machining regions and things like that. So that's a really nice feature as well. If you I don't have to go through and manually create the geometry.
Yeah, and also reducing it makes everything go faster. You know, display, toolpath generation, any downstream applications. Yeah. Everything.
I've received meshes from customers. I had somebody send me a mesh that had 40 million triangles in it.
Wow.
And I could barely open it, and it was just impossible to work with. So getting that number down, you don't need to have a lot of triangles in there to have a really clean model. You just don't need to, and you get a much, like you say, it's not cumbersome to work with, and you get a smoother, cleaner finish when it's machining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the next slide, I think, talks about the these little posts on the end, and these worked out really well again as a 4th axis positional part, and all I needed to do was create one face and then rotate it 90 degrees and go through and cut my other parts. And you can see the model in the upper corner, upper right-hand side was the model that I started with, and then the middle picture is it being machined, and you can see how cleanly the part machined off of the mesh. Now this particular part, I used a combined approach where I modeled the leaf work in ZBrush and imported it into Rhino, and then I modeled the other parts in Rhino, the more geometric parts in Rhino, and I got a great result and a great end product that required very, very little handwork after it was machined. And it becomes very efficient. You know, sometimes the question is it really worth spending the time modeling it? But on a job like this, you know, there's only 4 parts, but actually there's 16 faces. So when you think about it as it being 16 faces, and it really makes it worthwhile to go through and use this approach. So I'm not. I guess we can move on to the next one.
Yeah.
This is a prototype for a job that historic restoration, and the original was, this is a scan from an original carving that was done by an architect back in the 1800s, and they want to have it reproduced. The part here is cut in foam, and I was provided with the mesh, and I didn't do anything to it except reduce it and pull a curve from the mesh, and then carve the part. And it just took moments to set this up and have it ready to go on the machine and cut the part out.
So you used the mesh module to reduce it.
On this one, I used the Rhino mesh, but I didn't have the availability of your module yet to do it.
I see. Okay.
But yeah, and again, this one had millions and millions and millions of triangles in it that needed to get knocked out of it, and it gave me a really smooth, clean result. There's no handwork, there's no nothing. That's exactly the way it came from the machine. So.
Okay.
Yeah. What's next?
Yeah. The next slide, please.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. So anyway, the thing that's been really helpful for me in working with this software is that I have a lot of confidence in it. You know, when you're making one part at a time, one-offs or just short runs of something, you don't have a lot of time to prepare your parts. You don't have a lot of time to proof your parts. I need to have confidence that when I go to my machine and hit the start button, that it's going to do what it's supposed to do, and not dive in too deep or whatever. Sometimes I end up doing jobs that have fairly expensive parts on the table. I can have fairly expensive tooling on the table, and all it takes is one misstart, and it'll ruin everything. So I like that I can really trust this software. I can go through and visually see on the screen what it's going to do. If I'm unclear about how something might work, I can do a simulation, and that will confirm that it's doing what it's supposed to. And so, as just a regular everyday tool, it's been great for me. And the other thing that's been really essential is the technical support that I've received from MecSoft. Not being technically inclined, not coming from a technical background, I stepped into a world that was so new and unfamiliar to me. And knowing that you guys were there every time I had a question made this really work for me. And I just can't thank you enough for that. I mean, that's so important with this type of product, especially when you're in a situation where you got a job that you got to get done, and you run into a problem, and you guys have always been there. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks for the kind words, Jim. We have a question from one of our customers, and
sure, absolutely.
He's asking, what model brand is your wood CNC?
What brand? I'm using it's called a New CNC machine. That's the name of it. It's New CNC.
Yeah, actually we partner with New CNC, and they actually sell Rhino and RhinoCAM as well, so you can check it out.
In fact, when they first started, they asked me how I felt about your product, and I told them that they need to partner with you. So
I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
So
all right. So Jim, thanks so much for your show and tell here.